All right, everyone, welcome back. For those of you really keeping a close eye on current events, maybe especially if you're gearing up for something comprehensive like the UPSC exams, well, staying plugged into major global shifts is just essential.
Absolutely.
And today, that's exactly what we're doing in our deep dive. We're zeroing in on a really significant potential change in U.S. immigration policy, one that could directly hit international students and particularly students from India. We're talking about the Optional Practical Training Program, OPT.
Exactly. OPT, in simple terms, it's basically a system allowing international students, the ones on F1 visas, to get some real work experience in their field right after they graduate.
Okay.
Think of it as, a bridge from the classroom to the workplace.
Okay.
And there are two main types: pre-completion, while still studying, and post-completion, which is after graduation.
Right, and it's that post-completion OPT that's suddenly in the spotlight. Because there's this new bill introduced in the U.S. House, it's called the Fairness for High-Skilled Americans Act of 2025. And the core proposal, well, the part we're focused on today, is to actually end the post-completion OPT program entirely.
That's the heart of it. And, considering how many Indian students use OPT, especially the post-completion part, this is definitely something to watch closely. We're drawing our insights today, by the way, from a really thorough piece in the Indian Express that breaks all this down.
Okay, so let's unpack this OPT program a bit more. It's for F1 students, yes, but what's the thinking behind it? What's its purpose?
Well, the fundamental idea is really to give these students a chance to apply their academic learning in, a practical, real-world setting. It's meant to bridge that theory-practice gap, helps them build skills, gain an edge in the job market globally, kind of like a practical training period.
Got it. And this post-completion OPT, the one under threat, that starts right after graduation, and it
Uh,
gives them, what, 12 months?
Up to 12 months, yes. But there's a really critical piece here, especially for STEM students.
Right, science, technology, engineering, math.
Exactly. Students with degrees in those fields can apply for an extra 24 months. That's the STEM OPT extension.
Oh, okay.
So add that to the initial 12, and many STEM graduates can actually work for up to 3 years in the U.S. after finishing their studies.
3 years, that's significant and clearly very popular, judging by the numbers in the Indian Express article. What kind of scale are we talking about here?
The growth is pretty staggering, actually. For the 2023-24 academic year, you had about 2.43 lakh international students on OPT.
2.43 lakh. Wow.
Yeah, and that's like 22% of all international students in the U.S. Just 10 years back, that number was only around 1.06 lakhs.
So it's more than doubled in a decade.
It really has. Tells you just how vital this program has become for international students.
And specifically for students from India, they're a huge cohort in the U.S. How does OPT participation look for them?
Very significant. Out of the roughly 3.31 lakh Indian students in the U.S. last year, about 97,556 were using OPT.
97,000. So that's nearly 30%.
Around 29%, yeah. And linking back to the STEM point, a huge chunk of these Indian students are in STEM fields, and they are definitely aiming for that extra 2-year extension.
It really highlights how much OPT, especially with the STEM extension, has become a core part of the pathway for Indian students wanting that practical experience post-study.
Definitely. And STEM fields themselves are just incredibly popular overall. Think mathematics and computer science, that's 2.82 lakh students, a full quarter of all international enrollments.
Huge numbers.
And engineering's another big one, 2.9 lakh. For Indian students specifically, almost 43%, 42.9% to be exact, are in maths and comp sci. So that concentration directly feeds the demand for those STEM OPT extensions we talked about.
Okay, so the program is clearly massive, widely used, especially post-completion in STEM. Now let's pivot to the bill itself. The Fairness for High-Skilled Americans Act of 2025. What's its bottom line? What's it trying to do with OPT?
Well, its main aim related to this is very clear. Eliminate the post-completion OPT program. Full stop. It's really important, though, to be precise. It targets the work authorization after students finish their academic programs.
Okay, so just to make sure I've got this right, it's not trying to stop students working part-time or whatever while they're still actually enrolled in studying full-time.
That's a key distinction, yes. The bill doesn't propose changing rules for F1 students actively studying. The focus is purely on that work period after graduation provided by post-completion OPT.
Right, got it. So why? What are the arguments being put forward for getting rid of post-completion OPT? What's the rationale?
Well, according to the reporting, drawing on experts and supporters, particularly those aligned with former President Trump's perspectives, the main argument is that OPT hurts American workers.
How so?
The claim is that it takes away jobs or makes it harder for recent U.S. graduates and even experienced American professionals to find work in high-skilled areas.
So protecting the domestic workforce is the primary stated reason.
That's definitely a central pillar of the argument. They also argue it gives employers, let's say, an incentive to hire foreign workers, possibly at lower wages. Another point they raise is that OPT acts like a sort of workaround for the H-1B visa caps.
A loophole, essentially.
That's the term sometimes used, yeah.
Yeah.
A way for companies to bring in foreign talent without going through the whole H-1B process. And finally, there's a tax argument.
Okay.
They contend that employers hiring OPT students can avoid paying certain payroll taxes, like FICA and Medicare. Now, it's really important to stress these are the reasons being given by the bill's proponents.
Understood. Presenting their case. Now, has something like this been tried before? The article mentioned a 2019 bill.
That's right. A similar bill was indeed introduced back in 2019, but it didn't really get very far. It went to a subcommittee in the House, but there was never a vote on it. So this isn't the first time the idea has surfaced, but the previous attempt stalled.
And how does this new bill fit into the current U.S. political climate? Does it connect to broader themes we've seen?
Well, yeah. If you look at the bigger picture, it definitely aligns with a certain perspective on immigration, particularly one focused on potential impacts on the domestic job market. Former President Trump, for instance, often emphasized policies aimed at prioritizing jobs for Americans. This bill kind of taps into those same concerns about competition for jobs and the role of foreign workers.
Okay, so those are the arguments for the change. But what about the other side? What concerns or counter-arguments are analysts raising?
This is where it gets really interesting. Many analysts point out that U.S. businesses across many sectors actually rely quite heavily on global talent.
Including people who come through OPT.
Exactly, including those who start their careers via OPT. The big worry is that cutting off this pathway could actually hurt U.S. companies. It might limit their access to skilled workers, which could in turn dampen innovation and maybe even slow down economic growth.
So potentially quite a backlash from the business community.
That's what's anticipated. It's expected that if this bill progresses, it could face pretty strong pushback from both private companies and maybe even public sector groups. They see the value international graduates bring and the disruption this could cause to how they currently recruit and operate. It's a major shift from the status quo.
Okay, this has been a really insightful deep dive. So for you, our listeners, and especially if you're prepping for UPSC where understanding policy nuances is vital, let's quickly recap the key points. We have a proposal in the U.S. to eliminate post-completion OPT. This program is, as we've heard, incredibly significant for international students, especially from India, offering that vital post-graduation work experience, particularly in STEM. The arguments for scrapping it center on protecting American jobs and perceived unfair advantages for employers hiring OPT workers.
Right. But then the counter-arguments highlight how much U.S. businesses depend on this talent pool and the potential negative economic impacts of removing it. Remember, all this context comes from that recent Indian Express article.
It definitely raises a crucial question for analysis, something relevant for your UPSC thinking. What are the wider ripple effects of a policy change like this?
Exactly. It's not just about individual students' plans.
Yeah.
It touches on economic competitiveness, innovation, the global flow of talent, all really interconnected issues.
Absolutely. We definitely encourage you to explore this further, look into immigration policies more broadly. Staying informed on these developments is just so critical as they can shape future opportunities worldwide.
And for all of you focused on the UPSC exams, we really hope this breakdown of a very current, very relevant international policy issue has given you some valuable context and perhaps some new angles for your analysis.
Yes, and if you found this deep dive useful for understanding the OPT situation and its potential changes, please do hit like and subscribe. We aim to bring you more in-depth discussions on current affairs pertinent to your UPSC journey. And definitely leave your comments or questions below. We always appreciate hearing what topics you'd like us to tackle in future deep dives. Once again, our discussion drew heavily from the reporting in the Indian Express.
And maybe leave you with this final thought, especially relevant for UPSC's global perspective. Considering how interconnected our economies are, how talent moves across borders, what long-term effects might policy changes like this proposed OPT elimination have on innovation and growth, not just in one country, but, well, globally?